to another episode of the Film Nerd Podcast. I'm Vince, and it has been a while. I have not posted or uploaded an episode or discussed movies on this channel since August or late July. I think it was early August, late July. I uploaded a conversation, an episode about the Suicide Squad with a couple guests, and I have been silent ever since. If you follow me on Twitter or Instagram or Letterboxd, I have continued to periodically in this period of absence have posted some reviews and my thoughts on some movies, but I coach high school football, and so from August to November, early November, the season pretty much takes up all my time, and my wife and I, having two kids now, just not much time to sit down and record episodes and edit and upload them talking about movies. I was hoping to get back into this in late November, December, just didn't get around to it because then I started another podcast with two friends, two of my buddies. We started a football podcast, American football, if you are not from here for whatever reason, listening to my dumbass talking about movies. But that has now taken up quite a bit of my time as well, as I do most of the editing and uploading for that. So, and this is all for fun. Don't make any money doing this. This is just something to do in my free time. So I was waiting and looking for an opportunity to kind of get things going again. I have had some episodes kind of fall through, looking for some people to discuss movies with. I have about 3 to 5 people I've sent texts with and had discussions with, and nothing kind of ever came to fruition. So I finally just decided, you know what, I'm going to set some time aside and I'm just going to do it by myself, just talk about some movies. I did upload some episodes last year where I talked about things I had been watching, and I would like to try and start that again. I'm going to try to keep this episode to under a half an hour. I'm going to try to briefly go through just kind of some movies that I think were memorable that I watched from August until now. Again, if you follow me on Twitter, Letterboxd, or Instagram, I do put reviews out there as well, my written thoughts, and I have for some of these, not all of them, but some of them I have put out some written thoughts if you're interested. So, but I'm just going to kind of run through this list. Again, this is kind of similar to what I did last year, where I just talked about my thoughts on movies I've been watching. I am going to kind of, going forward, break this up a bit. I had been talking about new releases, old releases, TV series, and then my 1001 movies you must see before you die challenge. I've been kind of including all of those segments in the same episode. I think going forward, what I'm going to start doing, I'm going to start it with this episode, is I'm just going to talk about the movies that are new that I've been watching in one episode, and then a different episode I will talk about my 1001 movies you must see before you die challenge. That will be a separate series going forward. In that series, I will also include any other just random old films that I've watched for the first time that I think are worth discussing or talking about. So that's how things are going to kind of go going forward. I do have something in the works with one buddy, friend of mine, Connor McKitty. If you're listening, shout out to you, pal. Him and I are trying to work on doing some special episodes, some discussions going forward. Still working on trying to get with some people to discuss some movies here when I find time, when things kind of work out, where we can sit down and discuss some of the people I've reached out to. I also do plan on putting out my 2021 best of the year list. Usually don't get around to doing that until close to spring, because I know some people like to put their lists out as soon as the year is over. I don't like to do that because like I just mentioned, from August to November, I don't watch a lot of movies. I just don't have time in that 3-month period. So there's a lot of great movies that come out at the end of the year that I just miss. And I don't want to put my list out without seeing them. So I like to try and get as close to watching 100 films as possible from the year before I put my list out. Right now, I think I'm closing in on 60. So, there's a few dozen more movies that I need to catch up on and watch before I feel like I will have a satisfactory or a list that is definitive of the year in terms of catching all the movies that are worth checking out, in my opinion. So obviously I don't watch everything, but I try to watch all the ones that, are highly regarded or that people believe, are some of the best of the year. So I'll probably end up putting that list out closer to March. I'd like to get it out, in time for the Oscars. I think it would be fun to have it out by then. The Oscars are at the end of March this year. So I think that's feasible. It just will depend in the next 2.5 months here, if I can get caught up on some of those movies. So hopefully I can. All right. Getting that out of the way, just trying to get back on the horse here, man. It's been a while since I've had a chance to do this. So just trying to get some things out of the way. We'll go ahead and get started here with a few movies that I would like to talk about. So again, I'm going to run through. This episode is just going to be new movies that I have seen since August that are worth checking out. And then a few TV shows. I'm not going to go through everything I watched. Again, it's just going to be ones that I think are worth your time, just because there were a lot of movies. If I add them all up from August to now that I've seen, and then it's just going to take too much time. All right, so let's go ahead and jump in here. So the first series, I guess it's a series of films, 3 films that were on Netflix. The Fear Street series, which is an adaptation of books from R.L. Stine, who did the Goosebump series, very famous horror, teen horror series. This was something that apparently was supposed to be put out in theaters, and then some negotiations and due to COVID fell through. So this ended up being put out as 3 films. Pretty much they were released back to back to back within like a 3-week stretch on Netflix at the end of the summer. So it's Fear Street, and they're subtitled with their year. So it's Fear Street 1994, Fear Street 1978, and Fear Street 1666. And it follows the same storyline through the 3 films, but without spoiling anything, it kind of jumps around in time while maintaining the same storyline. I liked it. I enjoyed all 3. I thought they got progressively better. Some people might not agree with me on that. I thought the first one, the 1994, was really good. It was solid. Didn't love it. 1978 and 66, I liked even more. Basically, the whole series is kind of an homage to horror films first from the 90s. The 1994 film feels a lot like Scream. Very tongue-in-cheek, really over the top. I like that it's hard R. It does not hold any punches. 1978, kind of an homage to 70s slasher horror films. It takes place in a summer camp, so that really, fits the bill for a lot of horror movies. And then the 1666 one, the final movie in this series, takes place in 1666. It's kind of like folk horror. Feels like a recent horror film would be The Witch. It's not like The Witch, but in terms of setting and what it's going for, there's some similarities there. I enjoy it overall. I think it'll be something that when I get to my 2021 list, putting that out, that I will end up mentioning this. It'll be have a spot on my list. I think it's worth your time. If you're a horror fan, you should definitely check out the Fear Street series on Netflix. Next movie I want to mention, I did put a review out for this. A written review on Letterboxd, Instagram, and shared it out on Twitter. This was a while ago, early August, that I shared this out, and it's The Green Knight. The Green Knight at one point was my number 1 film of the year. It will probably stay firmly in my top 10. I can't, it's no longer my number 1, but it's very high. It will probably stay in my top 10, maybe even top 5 when everything's said and done. So this is written, directed, edited, produced. I believe he was a producer credit on this as well. David Lowery, who has done some, art house films. He also did a Disney remake with Pete's Dragon. He did a few films that I've enjoyed, but nothing that I've been overwhelmingly in love with. A lot of people love A Ghost Story. I enjoyed that movie, but it just didn't connect with me. I adored The Green Knight. The Green Knight is absolutely incredible. Most people who know me know I was an English major in college, so English, reading, papers, research, all that stuff was right up my alley for a long time. And The Green Knight was something I had to read in high school, AP English class. Sir Gawain and The Green Knight is the original Arthurian legend title that is anonymous, that it's so old and been passed around so long that there is not even a credited author. And so David Lowery adapted it. The legendary myth or legend, whatever you want to call it. And this movie's incredible. It's not going to be for everybody. A lot of ambiguity, which is intentional. If you've ever read the original poem, it's very ambiguous, very strange, definitely very fairy tale-esque. This movie kind of captures that. It takes some liberties and has to add some things to stretch this out to a feature length runtime. It is a little over 2 hours. It does meander and wander, but I think that's intentional. It's very dreamlike, incredible cinematography. Some of the things I wrote in my original review is the scope and scale in the storytelling in this. There's a lot of grand and timeless themes. I love the look and the presentation of this film. And again, I'm a really big fan of the ambiguity in the narrative, kind of leaving a lot of questions, not a lot of answers. I think it's very intentional because that's just how this original poem is. The original poem is very bizarre. Definitely not going to be for everyone. A poem that's 600 years old. In terms of meaning and interpretations, I think some people are going to be frustrated. It's going to have you scratching your head and thinking a little bit, and I love it because I think it's a very good discussion piece. This was one I wanted to try and get an episode to talk with someone with and never had a chance. But yeah, The Green Knight, definitely worth your time. I do not believe it's streaming anywhere yet, but I'm sure you could rent it anywhere on VOD or purchase it on Blu-ray. The next movie I want to talk about here was one that was on HBO Max, and I believe it is now back on HBO Max. I never put out a formal review for this because I watched it during the football season when I was coaching and just didn't have a chance. And that is the latest from James Wan, Malignant. It is an original horror film that he wrote and directed. And it was released in theaters. I don't know how much money it ended up making, so it did get the HBO Max treatment, where it was simultaneously in theaters and on HBO Max. When I first watched this, I had to watch this twice, because when I went in with a lot of hype for this movie. I was very excited for it, and and when I first went into it, the first hour, maybe a little bit more than halfway, I'm watching. I'm like, I like the visual style and presentation. I've always been a fan of how Wan directs his films and the way that they look. But narratively, kind of the storytelling, I remember feeling, what's so special about this? I'm not really getting anything, any vibes from this that I'm enjoying in terms of something new. I was looking for something new. And then there's a reveal late in the film. In the final act of this movie, I had to give it a little bit of higher rating just because the final act is batshit crazy. There's like a 15 to 20 minute sequence that is absolutely incredible. It made me, when I got to it, my jaw dropped. I'm like, okay, I got to watch this again. And rewatching it after having seen the whole film, kind of, for me at least, I could reassess some things in the first part of the film. And I kind of could see a little bit better what James Wan was going for on a second watch. He reportedly in an interview said that he wanted this movie to feel like something, if you went to a movie store in the 1980s and you wandered into the horror section at the very end and in the back, or, some dusty movie, some weird, cheap, grimy 80s horror movie that was released on video and no one knew what it was. He wanted it to feel like that, just some really weird 80s B movie. And you can kind of see that in the performances. And I think two subsequent viewings of this film helps to kind of understand what he's going for. And if you're a fan of horror, I think you got to check Malignant out. I think it's well worth your time. I don't think it'll be for everybody. But if you can get on board with kind of the B movie feel that he's going for, this final act is a blast. It's not going to be super high on my 2021 list. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars in Letterboxd. To me, it's somewhere between a 7 and 8 out of 10. But yeah, I really enjoyed Malignant. I think it's well worth your time. And I believe it's back on HBO Max because it was off for a little while. You should definitely check that one out. All right, next up is another one of my favorite films of the year. And along with The Green Knight, I awarded this film a 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I did it hesitantly because it's part 1 of 2, and that is Dune, the very famous novel that's been around for a long time, finally adapted. It's been adapted more than once. Nothing that's really been celebrated. Lynch's adaptation in the 80s, I believe, has been critically maligned. Denis Villeneuve with the latest adaptation here, written, directed, produced. I love Villeneuve. Denis Villeneuve is one of my favorite working directors. I've loved everything he's done, and this is no different. The scope and scale of this film is breathtaking. I just can't believe how massive the world building is in this film. I think it's incredible. All-star cast, gorgeous score. I believe Hans Zimmer scored this film. Absolutely loved it. I'm waiting patiently, but kind of impatiently for part 2. I gave this 5 stars hesitantly because it's very, very abruptly at part 1. Without spoiling anything, it just ends at a very abrupt moment. You're like, oh, that's it, the movie's over. I mean, it's a very long film, but for me it flew by, and when all of a sudden it ends, you're like, oh shit, now I gotta wait. I think it's 2 years, well, now a year now. I think it's supposed to come out in 2023, part 2. But looking forward to the second part. This film is also going to be very high on my list. I'm hoping that it finishes off with a bang. I've never read the novel. I haven't been a big reader as of late, but I would like to check it out at some point. So Dune, definitely worth your time. I don't know if it's back on HBO Max. It was for a little bit. I was excited to get to catch this in theaters, and I rewatched it on HBO Max. Next film, I did not put a review out for this film. I will probably rewatch it and then put a review out. I just didn't get around to it in November. Things got kind of crazy. I didn't get a chance to put a review out. This was around Thanksgiving. I watched this, and it was Pig, a kind of small, I don't know if I'd call it an art house film, but maybe a little bit more of an artsy film. I believe this is an A24 venture with Nicolas Cage. He's been big lately on doing a lot of small roles. He did one of my least favorite films of the year too. I hated I think it was Willy's Wonderland is the name of it. I hated that movie. Pig's one of my favorites of the year. I gave this 4.5 stars on Letterboxd. It's a solid 8 or 9 out of 10 for me. I loved this movie. It is very subversive in more ways than one, and part of that was the marketing kind of, they portray this as like a revenge thriller, and there's aspects of that, but it's far more melancholy and thoughtful and reserved than what was marketed. It's a very surprising film. That's all I can say about it. I think it's one you should definitely check out. It's Nicolas Cage plays a truffle hunter who lives alone in Oregon, and his pig is kidnapped. His truffle hunting pig is taken from him. Pignapped. But I love this movie. It's gorgeous. I really like the music. It's very emotional, and I just loved how reserved it was. Didn't hit you over the head with anything crazy. Wasn't in your face. It was just a very, very mature film. I really liked Pig a lot, and I think it's one that everyone should definitely check out. The next film that I watched that is worth your time is from Jim Cummings. I absolutely love Jim Cummings. I love everything he stands for. This guy pretty much self-funds or independently funds all of his films with the idea that he is trying to keep them from being controlled by the Hollywood machine, is kind of what he puts out there in interviews and on Twitter, as he encourages people to take control of their movies. That's a very admirable thing to do in this industry. I know it's very challenging. I think he did a maybe not GoFundMe, but some similar Kickstarter or something. I think he did Kickstarter to get a lot of producers, money for this film. It's called The Beta Test. He made one of my favorite films of the year in 2018, Thunder Road, and The Wolf of Snow Hollow was on my 2020 list. I really liked that movie. The Beta Test is a thriller film from him that kind of feels like it's been influenced by Eyes Wide Shut. It's very different. I'm not trying to tell you that this movie's like Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. It's not, but there's elements and influences there in terms of the story. without spoiling anything. Essentially, the synopsis is: an engaged Hollywood agent receives a mysterious letter for an anonymous sexual encounter and becomes ensnared in a world of lying, infidelity, and digital data. That's the synopsis. I don't think this is better than Thunder Road. I even think Wolf of Snow Hollow maybe a little bit better. I don't know. Some people enjoyed this less than Wolf of Snow Hollow. I think it's maybe better, but it's not a perfect film. I think the storytelling feels very surface level and thin. And I think he was a co-writer on this. He was not the sole writer. He was also a co-director. So I think some of his talent is being thinned out here and split up with another individual. So it's not all his project. He's the lead starring role again in all the films he's done. He is the lead actor as well. He's a great actor. I really enjoy what he does. But the beta test, I believe I just rented this one, I think, on Amazon. Definitely worth your time if you want to see an independent thriller film. I think it's very well done. I really like his style. This one will make it on my 2021 list as well. Next film is HBO Max, same day release as well, and that is King Richard, about Serena Williams and Venus Williams' father, Richard Williams. I'm not big on biopics. I always tell people this. I always say this in my reviews, that biopics are just some of my least favorite films because inherently they always feel very clunky, because they are the writers, directors, producers, everyone working on those films has to cut things out. They can't include everything about the person or people that the film is focused on. I really liked Rocket Man. I thought that one was very well done, but that one had a certain panache and style, visual presentation, music aspect to it. King Richard's pretty well done. I gave this one 4 stars on Letterboxd. I think it's a solid 7 to 8 out of 10. And really what raises it to that level is Will Smith's performance. Will Smith is brilliant in this movie. I think it's one of the best performances he's given in a while. He's almost unrecognizable. Obviously, Will Smith is just one of those faces that's like, oh, that's Will Smith. But his performance, he really dives deep into this performance and kind of loses himself, and I love it. I think he does a really great job. I think the film suffers from what I just mentioned, that it does feel kind of like there's a lot missing, but they can't talk about everything from the Venus or from the Williams sisters and their families' lives. But I have read online that some people are critical of some of the things that have been excluded from this movie, that Richard Williams is not a saint. He's portrayed very positively in this movie, which I think is great. And I think it's noteworthy that the Williams sisters were both producers on this film. So I'm sure they had some say if they were putting money up for this movie to be made. I'm sure that they had some say on what went in this film. I do not believe they have writing credits for the movie, but I'm sure they had some influence on how their family was portrayed, and maybe they didn't want some of the negative stuff in there, which is fine. It's a movie. So I think it's worth checking out. I think it's good. I enjoyed my time watching it. I gave it 4 stars just because of Will Smith's performance. I don't think it does anything super special in terms of visuals or technical aspects. I remember, I watched it several weeks ago. I think all that stuff was fine, but I enjoyed it. It was worth the time, worth checking out. Might sneak on at the bottom of my 2021 list. I'm not sure because I still have quite a few movies to watch here. All right. Next up is a French horror thriller film, and it is absolutely insane. And the spelling is Titane, and I'm terrible with French pronunciation. I've heard it pronounced more than one way. I've heard Titane, I've heard Titane. I'm not exactly sure on the exact pronunciation. I'm so bad with French. I'm a Spanish teacher, so if it was Spanish, it'd be a little bit easier. But it's directed by Julia Ducournau. I hope I said her name right. I don't think I did. She did the French film Raw that came out a few years ago, which I think I snuck onto my list. I think I mentioned it. I don't remember if I did or not. But she is very much diving deep into body horror films with both those movies, especially this one. This one definitely very much in the body horror genre. This movie is not for everybody. I'm gonna tell you that right now. If you are thinking that I am recommending this, I am not recommending this to the average moviegoer. If your favorite movie of the year is Spider-Man, I would not be watching this movie if I was you. I really enjoyed it. I love the weird shit. Give me all the weird stuff. It has a lot on its mind. It's a movie I need to watch again because I think there's a lot of meaning in some of the visuals and sequences in this movie. I think some of it doesn't have meaning. I think some of it's just weird for weird's sake and trying to be entertaining. It's an experience. Again, I don't think I can recommend it to everyone. It's a funny movie too. It's funny. It's disgusting, suspenseful, weird, horrifying, surprisingly emotional. There's a couple emotional scenes. It's kind of a full spectrum of emotions and experiences. It's very memorable. Definitely a very memorable movie and original movie. It will make it on my list. I'm not sure how high. It's one that I need to watch again. Titane, I think is how you say it. Titane. I think I just rented this one on Amazon. I gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd. Hesitantly, I may change that. I need to rewatch it. Next one is a movie that is currently on Netflix and is getting a ton of buzz. I need to put out a written review for this because it's one of my favorite films of the year, and one that I really need to watch again. And that is The Power of the Dog. I'm shamefully have not seen any other Jane Campion films. She's the writer-director of this film. I remember going through her filmography after watching this movie. I was like, man, I haven't seen any of her other films. I definitely need to check them out. Amazing film. I really hope she gets nominated for quite a few awards for this movie. I believe it's adapted from a novel, so it'd be best adapted screenplay if it gets that award at the Oscars. Hopefully best director, hopefully best music and best cinematography. I believe it was on the short list for best music for the Oscars. They released some of their shortlist nominees. This movie stars Benedict Cumberbatch, also has Jesse Plemons in it, Kirsten Dunst. I feel like I don't see her in enough movies anymore. I love Kirsten Dunst. Cody Smith-McPhee, who I can't believe how tall that guy is now. I remember watching him in movies in his when he was a bit younger. I think he's like 21 or 22 now, and seeing him kind of grow up in movies, he is sprouted up. That dude's really tall now. But this is a great movie. It's a movie that is very theme heavy. Another one that's very contemplative. A lot of meaning to be taken away from this movie. The final moment of this movie is, a lot of people have said one of the best of the year, and I would agree. Incredible final scene in this movie. It is a period piece about ranchers, and I can't remember what decade it takes place in. I think it's early 20th century because there are cars in the film, very old cars, so it's early 1900s. And yeah, I love this movie. Benedict Cumberbatch is great. Cody Smith-McPhee is great. Kirsten Dunst, Jesse Plemons, they're all fantastic. Music's great. Love this story. Love the themes being presented here. It's definitely one worth your time. It is on Netflix. It's one I need to watch again, and I look forward to checking out again. The next film that I watched in a theater, it was one of the first films I saw in a theater in months when I sat down to go watch this one, and that is Nightmare Alley, the latest film from Guillermo del Toro. This is my current favorite film of the year. Sometimes I second guess my favorite film of the year. Sometimes it's a gut reaction. I love this movie. It's getting praise, but not nearly as much praise as I gave it. I gave it a perfect 5-star on Letterboxd. Oh, Power of the Dog, I gave a 4.5 on Letterboxd out of 5. Power of the Dog is like a 9 for me. May change on subsequent rewatch, but Nightmare Alley, I gave a perfect review. Many people, I'm sure, won't agree with me that it's a perfect film. And I was not aware going into it until after watching it that Nightmare Alley is actually based on a book. It was a book in the early 1900s, 1930s, I believe the novel came out, and then there was a film adaptation in the 1940s. I'm not 100% on that, somewhere around there, and I was not aware of that until after I watched the film, when I saw in the credits that it was based on the novel by so-and-so, and then I did some reading online and saw, oh, there was another movie. The movie that came out, the original adaptation decades ago, apparently was well received. This movie is an adaptation of the book, not a remake of the film. Guillermo del Toro was very clear on that in interviews, some things I read. Sorry, I just got the year. 1946 novel, 1947 film, the original. I love this movie. It's a noir film, straight noir. If you don't know what noir is, it is a genre that was very prominent in films in the 1940s, 30s, 40s, 50s, especially the 1940s. It's not really a genre that people do anymore. There's lots of neo-noir films, modern films that have elements of the noir genre. But this is a straight noir film. I don't remember the last time I saw a modern noir film that's straight following that genre. It's a very broad label. If you look up what it means online, you will see that it generally is more about mood. Noir films are very much about mood and setting. They tend to take place during a certain time period, and that tends to be the 1940s, that early part of the 20th century. They tend to be centered on a character who is involved in a mystery, generally a male who is, kind of following a path, looking for something, discovering something very existential. Usually, again, very moody atmosphere, dark, a lot of heavy, darker elements. They're not usually happy films, usually bad endings, dark endings. And that's one of the things I loved most about this film was its ending. It is a longer film. It does meander a bit in the first half and in the middle, but that is also part of the noir genre. This film very much fits in that niche of that genre, where you're kind of following this character around. It's building atmosphere, building up the characters, building up the world. And then the final act, I love the end of this movie. It's very dark. A lot of people are not going to agree with me that it's a perfect film or that it's one of the best of the year, but it just hit all the nails, or hit the head of all the nails that I look for. I don't know what I'm trying to say there. It just kind of hits all my buttons, all the things I want to see in a movie. I just really enjoyed it. I love anti-heroes or villainous protagonists when you're following a main character who is presented ambiguously. I don't want to spoil anything, but the main character, Bradley Cooper, is presented, as kind of morally ambiguous to start the film. And then you discover some things, you find some stuff out. And I love that. I'm a big fan of Breaking Bad, movies and TV shows where, Tony Soprano, The Sopranos, where you're kind of you're following a villain, and, they're not really likable. Maybe you like them at first and then you find out things about them. I kind of like that stuff. I don't know. And I love, I don't want to spoil the ending, but I love the ending. I think it's great. Incredible cast, huge cast in this movie. I couldn't believe as I was watching, I wasn't aware of all the people in this movie, but yeah, Nightmare Alley, support this movie. I loved it. I thought it was great. Next new film is Netflix currently, and that is Don't Look Up. This is the latest film from Adam McKay, who has done a lot of great movies. I really like Adam McKay, The Big Short, Step Brothers, Anchorman, Talladega Nights. He did Vice a few years ago, which a lot of people were not big fans of Vice, even though it got a lot of love at the Oscars. I enjoyed Vice. I didn't think it was a great film. I thought it was a good film, and that's kind of how I feel about this movie. This movie is also getting a lot of mixed reviews, all ends of the spectrum, but I enjoyed it. I'm seeing a lot of people negatively review this movie. A lot of people who are calling it very heavy-handed, which it is. The movie is a metaphor for global warming. It's a heavy satire of media, social media, kind of pop culture, and currently how we look at the world, how we consume things. It's a satire of how we kind of, especially Americans, have their world views are very messed up. And it's very heavy-handed in its message, but I think that's kind of the point. The things that satire, and I think, are things that should be heavy-handed and in your face. It's not a perfect film. I enjoyed the performances. I like the music. I like the editing style and the direction and the satire. Some people are disliking it for those very same reasons. It might be low on my 2021 list, and I think I'm in the minority in this one. I enjoy it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I think it's somewhere between a 7 and an 8 for me. I think it's worth your time. It's long. That's one big criticism of it, and I agree with that one. It is a bit long. It's like almost 2.5 hours. It should have probably been cut down a bit more, but I enjoyed it. Don't Look Up. The next film that is also now very high on my list, one of my favorite films of the year, is The Matrix Resurrections. The latest film, unfortunately not from the Wachowskis, plural. Lana just did this one on her own. Lily did not come back. She reportedly needed to take some time away from filmmaking. So Lana wrote, directed, produced this one with some other people. This is one that is very mixed. Very, very mixed. People are hating this or loving it. I love it. If you know me, if you watch my reviews, or if you read anything I put out there in regards to movies, you know that I'm very critical of blockbuster films. I'm very critical of sequels, remakes, reboots. I went into this film, thinking, oh, this is just going to be another cash grab sequel, reboot, whatever. I love the original Matrix. It's one of my favorite movies. When I was going into this, I rewatched Reloaded and Revolutions. I don't think I'd ever seen either of those films. I think maybe I watched bits and pieces of them the year they came out. I was 11 years old, like 5th grade, when the sequels came out. And I think I watched them at a friend's house. Very vaguely remember bits and pieces. I don't even know if I watched them all. So for me, it was the Reloaded and Revolutions was a fresh watch for me, because I really didn't remember anything about them, or not much anyway. I love Reloaded. I think Reloaded is honestly almost just as good as the original. I don't think it's perfect. I think there's some things that aren't as great as the original in it, but I think it does everything a action sequel should. And Revolutions, I think, kind of loses its way. I think it kind of gets away from the things that I enjoyed most about the series. Resurrections is a completely different kind of blockbuster film. I don't want to spoil anything, but I also think if I don't mention some of these things, that people won't understand why I love it so much. So why I love this movie so much is it's basically a parody of blockbuster sequels, reboots, franchises. The entire film... So I guess I'll put a little bit of a spoiler label right here. So this is kind of very mild spoiler. So if you don't want to be spoiled mildly, I'm not going to spoil like very severely. The Matrix Resurrections, watch it. It's on HBO Max before you listen to what I'm going to say. Basically, this movie retreads the entire franchise, but does it in a way that's like making fun of itself. It even at times is making fun of its own production company, distribution company, HBO. I mean, it's openly and very tongue-in-cheek and very much wink in the camera, making fun of and satirizing everything surrounding franchise filmmaking, reboots, blockbusters, cash grab aspects, all of that. But it does so. It does all of this while also doing its best to stay faithful to the franchise and its characters. And it continues the story in a very interesting way, but not in a way that I think is going to be satisfying for people who just wanted more of the same. If you just wanted more of the same and you're looking for nostalgia and comfort food here, it's not there, because basically it is subversive and different in every way, very intentionally. At least I saw it all as being done very intentionally, and I think that's going to upset people. It has already. There's a lot of people who hate this, who are calling it the worst movie of the... This is showing up on worst movie of the year list and best movie of the year. It's going to be high on my list because I loved it. I love that it did not give a shit, that it's just a giant middle finger to franchise filmmaking, but also still found a way to tell an emotional story with two of the most important characters in the series, Trinity and Neo. I loved it. It does a lot of things that people don't like, and everything that people aren't liking is kind of what I'm liking about it. So yeah, I give this a 5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I don't think it's a perfect film, but I think the movie's got balls. I really do. I think Lana Wachowski and company, I think what they did took guts to come back and make a movie like this that is so different from normal franchise filmmaking. And people are hating it. I love it. I think it's worth your time. I think you should check it out. I think it's different, unlike any blockbuster film I've ever seen in terms of what it's going for. I think it's all very intentional. I think there's a lot of themes that people are missing. I think there's a lot of a lot of messages that people are missing and a lot of ways to interpret this that some people are probably not missing it and just don't care. But yeah, I loved it. Matrix Resurrections. All right. Next film that I want to talk about, I watched recently, and that's Ridley Scott's latest venture, The Last Duel. Excuse me. Ridley Scott came out when this movie bombed at the box office and said some really stupid ass things about millennials. Something about what it boils down to. I got the quote right here. I think what it boils down to, what we've got today, are audiences who are brought up on these fucking cell phones. Millennials don't ever want to be taught anything unless you're told it on a cell phone. And he went on to basically say that that's why the movie didn't do well at the box office, is because of my generation and cell phones. First of all, some millennials are like 40 years old. I turned 30 this year, and I'm a millennial. I'm at the back end of millennials. The top end of millennials are like 40. Because most generations are about 15 years. I think he's more thinking of Generation Z, Zoomers. When he says this, I think people just nowadays just say millennials and use it to label all young people, which is, we're almost onto a third generation or a second generation after millennials. There's basically a new generation after Generation Z. It's just a stupid ass comment. Dude, you put out a movie during a pandemic that is a 2.5 hour medieval period piece about rape. People, that's not for everybody, and it cost $100 million to make it. I love this movie. I'm huge on medieval like period piece films. Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven, the director's cut, is one of my favorite films ever made. He even has the same composer who made the music for that film. I love the music for that film. Same composer is back for this film. Matt Damon and Ben Affleck were co-writers for this film, along with Nicole Holofcener. I'm sorry if I said her name wrong, but her and Matt Damon and Ben Affleck wrote this movie. It's an adaptation of a book, which is in turn based on a true story of one of the last duels to the death in France in the late 1300s over the rape of a knight's wife. The movie has the same storytelling technique as Rashomon, which ironically I just watched a few days for the first time, a few days before watching this, where it's the same story told 3 different times by 3 different characters' perspectives. And it culminates with the woman who has been raped, with her story. And the juxtaposition of 2 men's perspectives with hers as what they build up to, I found to be very effective and very powerful. It's a serious commentary on misogyny, especially at this time. I mean, men were awful to women at this time. You know, they were for a long time, still are. There's still men who are terrible to women. And it's just, there's some horrifying stuff in this movie that makes your jaw drop. I love the attention to detail. I love the costumes, the production, the look of this, the music, the storytelling, the performances. Ben Affleck is like unrecognizable. Him, Adam Driver, and Matt Damon, their performances in terms of their accents aren't bad. I've seen way worse accents, but they're not great. They're acceptable. I bought into them. I thought they were okay. They didn't go over the top or anything, fortunately. But Ben Affleck's performance is a little over the top, but I think he sells it. I think he does a good job. I love this movie, regardless of Ridley Scott being a jackass with the comments he said. The Last Duel, I thought it was great. I think you got to check it out. The last new movie I want to mention here, and my laptop's about to die, so I got to hurry up. In the Earth. I just watched this the other day. In the Earth is being regarded as one of the best horror films of 2021. I really enjoyed it. I think it's worth your time. It's on Hulu right now. This movie is not for everyone. I think if you like weird horror movies, check this one out. It's from Ben Wheatley, who has done a couple films I've seen. I haven't been a huge fan of his. The reviews for this have been fairly mixed. People are loving it or hating it. The film's best asset is it's a feast for the senses. Some of the craziest editing in terms of how it incorporates color and sound and visuals I've ever seen in a movie, like even more overwhelming than the sequence in 2001: A Space Odyssey. If you've ever seen that film, there's a sequence at the end that feels like you're on drugs or you're being put in a trance. There's a couple sequences like that in this film, but it's even more hypnotic, even more overwhelming, like to the point where it almost makes you nauseous. There's a warning. This movie has a PSA disclaimer at the beginning of the film that says, if you are prone to seizures, like light-induced seizures, to not watch this film, because there was a few moments I had to look away because the way they edit light and sound and color, it's so overwhelming to your senses. But to me, that's what makes this movie worth it, is it's unlike anything I've ever seen in terms of that experience. Didn't really offer anything for me narratively. The characters, the narrative, I wasn't huge on. There's some very tropey stuff here in terms of folk horror in the woods that I felt in terms of the narrative. It was nothing new to me. I felt like I've seen movies before. There was a movie on Netflix a few years ago called The Ritual, kind of reminded me of some of the things I saw in that movie. Nothing too special. Blair Witch Project, some folk horror movies with witches and things in the woods. Nothing really new there. It was more of the presentation and how it was executed that's well worth your time. I gave this one a 4-star on Letterboxd. Definitely worth checking out. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about here before I wrap this up are a few TV series, mini-series that I managed to watch since August. I believe these are the only 4 that I've kind of gone through or either finished or currently working on. It's just really hard for me to watch. I barely watch movies during football season, let alone TV shows. So I've been trying to watch a lot of movies to catch up for my 2021 list. So I did watch 2 Netflix miniseries that are going to go on my end of the year list. Last year, I didn't put miniseries in my list, but I brought them up. And these 2, if I counted them as movies on my list, would probably be top 5, top 10. And it is Midnight Mass from Mike Flanagan, and Squid Game, which is a Korean miniseries that they both were on Netflix. First, Midnight Mass. I did not put out a formal review for this. I probably will at some point. Maybe I need to rewatch it. Is an incredible commentary on religion. Reportedly, Mike Flanagan was brought up Catholic, and later in life became atheist. And I think that context is very interesting when going into this series. I absolutely love this. I gave it, you can review series on Letterboxd. I gave it 5 stars on Letterboxd. It's one of my favorite things I watched in 2021. It's about an isolated community on an island off the East Coast of the United States that starts experiencing some miraculous events and frightening omens after the arrival of a charismatic and mysterious young priest. I don't want to spoil anything about this. I think if you like horror, if you like any horror, this show is very theme heavy. If you like shows and movies, horror that you can derive meaning from, lots of interpretations, very discussion oriented, once you're done, you're like, man, I just want to talk about that with somebody. You should definitely check this out, especially if you like Mike Flanagan. I think Mike Flanagan is one of the most underrated horror creators. He did the Haunting of series, the Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor. I love his movies, and I think this is his masterpiece. I think this is the best thing he has done. There's an incredible performance from the actor's name is Hamish Linklater as the priest. He is stunning in his performance in this show. I was transfixed by some of his monologues he gave. I absolutely adored some of the conversations, and again, the themes presented in this show. I love the ending. I love where it goes. I love the journey. I think it's a very fascinating trajectory that this show takes. You just gotta hang on for the ride, man. I absolutely love this. I think it's incredible. I think it's something that anyone who loves horror, theme heavy horror, Mike Flanagan, should check it out. Midnight Mass on Netflix. The last mini series before I got 2 quick shows, I'll wrap this up. Squid Game. If you haven't heard of Squid Game, have you been under a rock? It became an international phenomenon late in the year. It was a series released on Netflix, a South Korean miniseries. Please do not watch the dub. I have friends, Corey, if you're listening, I can't believe you and Maddie watched the dub. If you check out some clips online of the dub of this series, it is bad. It is awful, like comically bad, like ruins the show bad. I don't understand why people are so unwilling to watch movies and TV shows in their original language and just read subtitles. People always go, I don't want to read while I watch something. Well, I'm like, I don't know. I'm used to subtitles. I watch everything with subtitles, even stuff that's in English helps me follow along better. But Squid Game, one of my favorite things I watched in 2021, I gave this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I didn't think it was perfect. I thought there was some subplots and some sequences in the show that I didn't always love. I thought it was a little clunky a few times narratively, but I love the music. I love the presentation. It's very emotional. I love the idea. The concept is super messed up. Very heavy commentary, social satire commentary on, class, which, follows Parasite, a great South Korean movie. There's a heavy commentary on classism. Continues that. Obviously a very important theme and topic in South Korea, but also relevant around the world. I think if you didn't watch Squid Game, that you gotta. And if you watch it, please watch it in the original language and just have subtitles on. Watch it in Korean. Do not watch the English dub. It ruins the show. I watched clips with the English dub and it's hilariously bad. And the show is not really ever supposed to be funny. Like, there's a few tongue-in-cheek moments, but it's supposed to be like a horror thriller drama. More so a thriller drama than a horror. There's some horror elements, but Squid Game. If you haven't seen it, where you been? Gotta check it out. Last two things I want to mention here. I've been watching the new seasons of Curb Your Enthusiasm and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I'm not done with either of them. I am 5 or 6 episodes into Curb, 2 or 3 episodes into It's Always Sunny. Just as great as ever. I mean, Curb is on season 11. I believe. I think this is season 11 for Curb. It's Always Sunny is on season 15. 2 shows that have both been on for a long time. Curb started in the year 2000. They haven't made Larry David hasn't made a season every year. And It's Always Sunny has been on since 2005 with a season, I think, almost every single year, pretty much. Both just as funny as ever. Both very much using the COVID pandemic to their advantage. Lots of humor from social situations and political situations that they are commenting on and satirizing in their respective seasons, and they're both great. If you've never watched Curb or It's Always Sunny, definitely worth your time. Hilarious. The latest seasons are also really, really great. All right, and with that, I'm going to wrap things up here. I will be doing a separate episode where I talk about some old films and my 1001 Movies challenge that I've been doing. If you listened, appreciate your time. Head over to Twitter, follow me at NerdVince, all one word, NERDVINCE. Head over to Instagram, give me a follow at Vincent R. Cook, just my full name, middle initial, VINCENTRCOOK. If you're listening on podcast stores, give me a 5-star review. Would appreciate a comment. Apple, Spotify should be on pretty much all your favorite podcast stores. If you have not been over to YouTube, shoot me a subscribe over there. Vince the Film Nerd on YouTube. Subscribe. Appreciate any comments, likes, shares over there with any of my episodes. Looking forward to doing more soon. I should be back. I will have another segment up right after this one pretty quickly on some old films that I've been checking out. Thank you for listening. Appreciate your time. And until next time, I'm Vince, Film Nerd Podcast. Go watch some movies.